Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, James Protin. Every week I will be sharing the experiences that have defined my journey and talking with people who have their own powerful story to tell. It's about doing better and being better in life, business, and all things in between. The visually inclined can catch us on YouTube, or you can check us out on just about every podcast platform. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We are here at our home away from home at Chico Bacello in Canonsburg, PA. And our guest today is Eric McElvenny. Eric is welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I'm glad you were able to come and we could catch up. I've known Eric since he was a little kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. He grew up with my son, and you've been on quite a journey, young fella.
Yes, it's been a fun one.
Yeah, so
sometimes
we we're like I said, we'll start. I'm going to start with the service because that's a big deal, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for you for not only for your service, but also for being a leader. You know, at the time you were coming out of high school, and it was before 9/11, it was before all of these things that made patriotism cool, right? And the military wasn't a cool thing to do back then. You know, so you went to the Naval Academy, went to Annapolis.
Yes, sir.
Very cool. So we touched on this, but why Marine Corps?
Marine Corps. I guess I've just always been interested in military, and I had to make a decision in the 8th grade because my 8th grade English teacher, I went to Ross Draver Middle School, Mrs. Christ. She gave us a career research report. What do you want to be when you grow up? With the caveat of you're not allowed to do this on being a professional athlete, because that's what every
That was a big part of who you were back then.
Yeah,
you know.
And I think most boys in the classroom would have chose a sport. So I ended up, my dad recommended, hey, why don't you just do it on the military? And I chose the Marine Corps because they had the best commercials on television.
Nice.
And that's criteria for choosing a career, I think. You know, good marketing team. You know, I wanted to be one of the few that proud the Marines. That jumped out to me. So I did the report. And it was like a research report, so we had to put some work into it, go to the library, learn the history of the Marine Corps, stop by the recruiter station, get some more information. And just by the end of this report, I was like, done. I'm sold. I want to be a Marine when I grow up. And I was heading that way. I had to do well in school. That was my mom's rule if I wanted to play sports. So I did well in school, and my grandpap, I think it was junior year, he kind of guided me towards the Naval Academy.
Okay.
With a really good sell. He said, 1, you can get a great education. It's like, yeah, all right, that's cool. 2, you can continue to play sports. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah. All right. And at Division I level as well. It's
Absolutely.
Okay. And then 3, when you graduate, you'll become a Marine, and you'll be a leader. You'll be a Marine officer. So it was like the trifecta. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's my dad help
you were all
put
in
the package together. And yeah.
That's good stuff. So how long were you in before your first deployment?
So I spent about a year training. So all Marine officers go to a school. It's called the Basic School. It's 6 months. It's in Quantico, Virginia. I could do without Quantico, Virginia in my life right now. But that was a 6-month course, and then towards the end of it, you choose your specialty.
Okay.
So there's, at that time, available, there are 19. From anywhere from like infantry to engineering to artillery to all the way down to like adjutant, and you put 1 through 19 what you want to be, and then they come back and tell you what you're going to be. And I was fortunate. My first choice was infantry because that's what I pictured when I was watching those commercials on television.
Sure.
So I got 0302 infantry officer, and then I spent another three months waiting for IOC, Infantry Officer Course in Quantico, Virginia, and then 3 months in Quantico, Virginia. So that was a year right there. Mm-hmm. I went to my unit in San Diego, Camp Pendleton, so a little bit north of. So then I checked into my unit. We did they just got back from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Ramadi, Iraq.
Okay.
I checked in as a new lieutenant in charge of these guys that are combat hard.
That already been.
So it was intimidating.
I bet.
But just honestly, that wealth of experience helped me grow as a leader. Not to say I know everything. It's like, all right, you guys are there.
Yeah. How'd that go?
I I had a lot of good leadership that explained this situation. And it's like, hey, when you go in, don't go in as you're just out of training, and it's a great training. Like, you're going to be best trained Marine in your unit, but don't go in letting other people know that. Go in with humility and gain respect.
Great advice.
So I was really sweating it. I was sweating it. Oh, it really is. But I was making it out to be a bigger deal than it was. When I met my my second in command. So I was going to be a mobile assault platoon leader, 10 gun trucks, a bunch of guns, and 40 to 50 Marines.
Okay.
And my staff sergeant, great guy, Staff Sergeant Harris. I met him first, and he's like, all right, you ready to meet the guys? You ready to do this? And I was like, I think. You have any advice? He said, well, just be you, man. Just be you. Yeah. And so I went in, met them, and I spent good 2 or 3 weeks just getting to know them and understand the schedule and how things are already rolling and what's going on. And getting to know them on a personal level before I was, started really stepping into the leadership, role, which helped a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So we did a quick workup about four months, to get ready to deploy overseas, and then we did what was called a Marine Expeditionary Unit. That was my first deployment. It was Southeast Asia. So we flew over to Okinawa, Japan, and then we were kind of stationed there at that time, and we would go on and off ship all throughout Southeast Asia. So it was a non-combat tour, but we went to just a ton of different countries, worked with a lot of foreign militaries. It was an interesting experience. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of the Marines that I graduated with, a lot of my friends that I trained with, their first pumps were over to Iraq or Afghanistan, and that's where we wanted to be.
Sure.
It's you don't want war, but if it's happening and you're trained for it, you want to be the person to go and be part of it.
Right.
So yeah, it was quick. And at this time, I met my wife at the Naval Academy. So she graduated ensign in the Navy, and she was on a ship out of San Diego. So my first deployment was kind of our first deployment. We already had our daughter, so now she was home with our daughter as I head out for, I think it was 7 or 8 months, which is hard because then she was training to deploy right after I got back. So it was just a lot on her plate that first deployment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how old was your daughter when you were deployed?
So the first one, it was 2 years old. She was 2, and I will never forget, because when someone comes up and says, hey, thanks for your service and your sacrifice, the sacrifice that I think, I don't think of being injured, losing a leg, I think of the time that I spent away from my family.
Right.
And I'll never forget leaning over. It was a nighttime. I was getting ready to go on that first deployment, and leaning over into the crib and giving her a kiss and just quietly saying, hey, I'll see you again in 8 months. I love you. That rips your heart out.
Oh my goodness.
It's hard. And that's what most
lot changes in a toddler in 8 months.
Yeah. Oh, a ton. So my wife and I, we both missed a lot of different firsts, and that was hard. It's time that you don't get back, and that's what every person serving in our military does. Any deployment or any trip or training, you're sacrificing time away from your life, your home, your family, and that's it's hard.
That's a sacrifice in itself.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is interesting, but after both of our first deployments, because I deployed, I came back, she deployed, she came back, I was getting ready to deploy.
How's that work on a marriage?
Before my second deployment, we kind of looked at each other and said, now it's my turn to go on vacation on deployment, because being at home was harder than being deployed.
I believe
it was in many ways, and definitely hard on our marriage. It was tough because and I think what really made it challenging is the first couple years of our marriage, we really didn't get to live together, so we just still didn't know how each other operated.
Yeah.
And then parenting, we had different parenting styles. Okay. So when I left, I came back, they were doing things I was like, that's not right. You know, that's wrong. So we would argue for, on and off for a couple weeks, and then she would deploy, and I would change everything around.
Change it back.
And then she would come back, and like, now we're operating this way, and now she's injected back into it, and it took a while for us to really start communicating well.
It's an interesting dynamic to have to overcome as a young couple.
Yes, it is. We ended up growing stronger through it, but there were times that I thought we were going to become a statistic, and we were heading towards separation at one point. And really, I think what really saved us is, that's when I started going back to church. My wife was on a deployment. We had talked like, hey, this isn't working, and it was crazy because we're talking about this, and I love this woman, and she loved me, but we just couldn't make it work. But when I started going back to church and, recognized what a selfless love is,
right?
That's when I was like, oh wow, maybe I am being a little bit selfish in our marriage, and that I can make some compromises, and we need to figure this out. But we did.
Deployment number 2. When did that come around? And
so deployment number 2 is probably 2009. So what happens? We got back from deployment number 1. The unit. So there's infantry battalions. There's 20 something active ones in the military right now. I was 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. Magnificent bastards, which was great.
There you go.
And definitely the best infantry battalion in the Marine Corps. Everyone would say that about their own infantry battalion.
Sure.
But
that's good.
battalion, a number of Marines, four companies, couple hundred Marines total. So we came back. Some guys leave, rotate to other units or to the next. Maybe they get out of the military. And then we get a bunch of new recruits who just went through boot camp in the School of Infantry. And then you kind of start the cycle again. You start the cycle to build up to the next deployment.
Okay.
My next deployment was another MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, but this one would be more Middle East. And a MU, there's always a force and readiness out there. Okay. So, for example, like if there's a tsunami somewhere in Southeast Asia, there is a bunch of Navy vessels with a bunch of Marines on them ready to be there within hours to help out. Or if there's an attack on an embassy somewhere, there is there's naval ships floating around with Marines on them ready to react immediately. So we were that force and readiness in the Middle East. Okay. Which is another very unique, very cool deployment. For a while, we thought we might get thrown into Afghanistan. It didn't happen. But we saw some pretty cool places. Spent time in Kuwait. Spent time in Jordan. Heading out there. Spent time in Indonesia, Thailand.
You were on a ship for this deployment.
Yes. So
what kind of ship?
So it was a LPD. It's a marine transport ship. Also, it has. I was on a smaller ship, but our marine unit in general were on a couple different ships. Yeah. And the bigger one has, it's not an aircraft carrier. It's not that large, but you can land helicopters and small jets on it as well. So it's really a self-sustainable unit. We had our own artillery, we had our own vehicles, had our own tanks, had our own aircraft. So you can just plug that in anywhere and they can operate amongst themselves. It's just a really cool watching the Marine Corps, the Navy Marine Corps team. And the communication, and so that was my second deployment, and that was another 7-monther. It's tough as Marines as well, because you all of a sudden on ship we didn't have much to do. Sometimes they let us do some target practice off the back of the ship. We'd always be training for what's going on next. Like we went into Indonesia to train with their military, So we got, every day we would do classes on, their culture, some language, preparing to train them. So, it was interesting, but really, like Marines on Navy vessels, we eat and we lift weights. And then you throw a little bit of some training in there and some classes. But it's
you're a captive audience. There's no people. You can't go far.
People get off ship and they're just like yoked. It's like, oh man, you guys have a pretty nice bench press on your ship, huh?
Nice.
So I had already done 2. My wife did 2 as well. Mm-hmm. She was on her second one when I rotated from my battalion because we did, in the Marine Corps, like the officers would do 3 years or 2 deployments in an infantry battalion, and then you rotate to a shore duty billet. We called it a B billet, where you're more of office setting. And my job, I was working at the School of Infantry as a company executive officer and making sure that right from boot camp, Marines would come to the School of Infantry and learn. If your MOS is infantry, it's 3 months. If maybe might be 2. If not, it's 1 month. And people would cycle through, and it was pretty boring. It was pretty boring.
Yeah.
Then out of nowhere, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines got assigned to go there. Now they're going to Afghanistan, and everyone was so excited. People were texting like, "Hey, we're going to Afghanistan soon." I was like, "Oh, great, have fun. Good luck."
Yeah.
And then my old boss, my commanding officer from the previous deployment, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just got an assignment where I'm going to be leading the Afghan police and army embedded training teams. So basically, there's a small Marine unit is going to embed into an Afghan army infantry company and be mentors, advisors, and liaisons to the Marines in the area." And my old commanding officer got that job with a battalion, and he was, at this time, this is 2011, it wasn't very kinetic. It was more of building up their forces because we were getting ready to get out of there.
Yeah.
So he was allowed to pick his staff NCOs, so the senior enlisted, and officers from the battalion, the ones that he wanted. He got first picks, and he reached out to me and said, "Would you want to come back and be part of this?" And I said, "Yes, I do." Let me run it by my boss first. So I emailed my wife, who was on a ship, and I just emailed her, "Hey, can you give me a call whenever you get a chance?" And a few hours later, she was able to call, and she said, "Hey, what's up?" And I was like, I just got this opportunity to go to Afghanistan, but I'm going to basically leave like as soon as you get back. What do you think? And she says, "Well, I don't want you to go, but I know that you would regret not taking this, and I support it. I'll support you to do that. Like, go for it."
Okay.
So I reached back out, and I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do this." Ended up getting put on this team. So we were like a larger team, but I ended up leading a team of 4 guys, I guess me included. And our job was to embed into an Afghan army infantry company, live with them for the 7 months and train them and advise them and try to make them independent of Marine help.
Okay.
So it was a very unique job.
Yeah, you're basically working yourself out of a job.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I was advisor to the Afghan army.
Okay.
There was also the Marine company was kind of co-located. So we had one forward operating base that a lot of the Marines and Afghans stayed at. That was headquarters. And then throughout our area of operation, which is a few miles north, a few south, there's just a bunch of smaller villages. And this is, it's desert, but it's like the clay compounds, houses.
Okay, sure.
There wasn't electricity or running water. It was like a farming district, but there are little villages popping around everywhere. So we had patrol bases, so smaller units of Afghan soldiers and Marines all over the place. And our job, we'd stay at headquarters for a little bit, and my team would then go to another patrol base, live with those Afghan soldiers for a while, patrol with them, go to another one, head back to our forward operating base, and then go back out like a day later and do that. Just continuously doing that, making sure that the Afghan soldiers were doing what they needed to do, had what they needed to be able to keep those villages safe and the villagers among them safe. So with that, every patrol was a combat patrol. We saw a lot of IEDs, which are the basically landmines hidden in the ground. There was, it took a few weeks before we had like our first contact, because at first we were staying really close, close to the villages that were already pretty safe. But then we were trying. There's this bubble that we called our security bubble, and eventually we wanted to expand it to the next village. You want to go into the next village, hire some of their villagers to be police forces, put in a patrol base for the Afghan soldiers to make this safe area grow. So when we started going out, that's when we started, our patrols would, we'd get shot at, we'd return fire, and we'd find more IEDs. And it wasn't extremely kinetic. It wasn't like every time we left the wire, you're getting shot at.
Right.
But there were patrols that you knew. It's like, okay, we're gonna go past this wadi, and as soon as we do, like, they're watching us, and they're probably gonna engage us. So it was a combat experience.
Okay. So you're injured. You're in Afghanistan. Where did you go from there?
So yes, I was immediately treated by my corpsman, Dog Strum. I was just fortunate that he was on this patrol with me, because he was on me just immediately. Saved my life. Marines just went into action to get me out of there. I was in the back of the helicopter. Another Marine triggered an IED, so I was on with him. And it was a 7-minute flight to a forward operating base with medical and surgery capability. And that's why you see a lot of traumatic injuries from Iraq and Afghanistan, is we started putting these surgical facilities on the front lines. So like I went there, they went right into surgery. They, patched everything up, cleaned everything out, or did the rest of the cutting. I don't know. I was sleeping. I woke up a little bit later in another base. It was Camp Bastion, and there's a hospital there. That was right in Afghanistan. From there, 2 days later, I think I flew out to Bagram, and another hospital. From there to Germany. So I was in Germany for I think 2 days. From Germany, I flew over to Walter Reed, and Bethesda, Walter Reed, Maryland. Sure. From there, I flew over to the one night there. I flew over to Central California. I don't even know where. And then the next day, flew down to San Diego, and I ended up at the Naval Medical Center. So I stepped on the IED December 9th, and I was back in San Diego December 15th.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it was just the communication was, and like when I think back now, I don't have bad memories of it. It's more like, wow, that was amazing, And there were hard times in there. But getting back to the Naval Medical Center, where since my wife Rachel and Luke Bay were living in San Diego, that's why I asked to be out there, because initially they were going to take me back to Walter Reed. I was like, isn't there anything closer to home?
Yeah.
We got Balboa. I was like, yeah, I know where that is. Sure, I'm sure be there. Yeah, sound good to you? Yeah, all right. So I ended up there. My parents flew out. My sister flew out. My other sister Heather was pregnant, but Shauna and Ben, they ended up coming out. So I had this welcoming party.
It was good for you. I mean, that's huge. So you're faced with were you given a choice to stay and do something different, or was it like, hey, you got to go home?
I was kind of given a choice. So what happens is you go through a medical review board, and at that time, because of all the injuries, it took months. But I was found unfit to continue duty because I'm missing a leg. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But at that time, we had the ability to appeal. And if you appeal it and prove that you can still pass all the tests, you can stay in the Marine Corps. So the other Marine that was injured the day that I was injured, Matthew Miller, he lost his left leg below the knee. He's now pinning on gunnery sergeant. Like, he stayed in the Marine Corps.
Is that right?
Yeah, he stayed in. I know some guys that stayed in infantry.
Really?
Yeah. There was one guy, was it Matt Lanford? He was with MARSOC, the Special Operations Command. Stepped on an IED, lost both of his legs above the knee. Stayed in. He was he was a company executive officer going to Afghanistan. And he was supposed to stay, inside the inside the base, but he didn't. He went out and he was like walking through, showing kids his robot leg. Like, hey,
No way.
you can't stop me. So
That is crazy.
So basically, I could have appealed and proved that I could stay in. And it was a hard decision. It was a hard decision because I was probably going to get out of the Marine Corps after that deployment. But now that I was injured, like I almost wanted to stay in. Like I wanted to, like, I don't know, maybe it was me proving to myself something.
Yeah.
But it was a tough decision. My wife and I prayed about it a lot and ended up making that decision to accept the retirement and get out and start something new.
Good for you. Good
Yeah.
for you. So your husband, your dad, and by the way, I love that all your materials, everything that I've seen, you put that first. That's a big deal. That means a lot. So Marine officer, and then now you go into, you shift and you're a Paralympian. So you've done 8 or 9 triathlons. Right?
So I've done 8 of the Ironman Triathlons.
Ironman Triathlon.
The first Ironman was definitely me proving something to myself. It was almost, and during the training for it, like I almost felt, I felt like I was being selfish, because to run an Ironman, you have to put in the work. You have to put in training. So I'm like out on the bike for 6 hours on a Saturday when I could be home with the family. So it was a sacrifice for them as well. But and here's how it happened. Like my commanding officer sent me an email when I was still in the hospital bed that said, "Let me know when you're going to run your first marathon." Right?
Is that right?
Yeah. And I realize now, like, he cared about me enough to challenge me.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But that's when I set that goal. I was like, I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm going to one up it. I'm tougher than that. And I set a goal to finish an Ironman triathlon. So I was like, basically hospital bed still when I set this huge goal that inspired me, and we just started pursuing it.
Who was the first person you told that to?
I told so my wife and my mom.
Yeah. How did they react? But
They laughed. I think so what would happen is I was coming off of some pretty serious medication, right? So, and I was trying to come off way quicker than I could because I just felt so dependent on other people. It feels really weird when you're a grown man, you're leading Marines in combat, and then the next day you are totally dependent on everyone. Like I wasn't allowed to drive because I was on medication and because I was missing a leg, and I don't know, I wasn't driving with my left foot yet.
Do you do that now? Do you drive left-footed?
I drive left-footed, yeah. Okay. But I was dependent, so I was trying to come off this medication so quick. So I would wake up, not take anything for a while, and then in the evening time, it's like I'm in a lot of pain. I need my little bit of medication. So I would take it and then feel pretty good. I feel pretty good. So I think I took it. We're sitting at dinner, and I said, I'm gonna run an Ironman triathlon, and they both kind of looked at each other and started laughing, and I was like, I'll show you guys. And so I told them, here's a really cool part of my story is my prosthetic practitioner, Peter Harsh. He was working. He was he headed up the prosthetics at the Naval Hospital in Balboa. When I met him, I found out that he had, at that point in time in his life, had finished 14 Ironman triathlons.
Really?
Qualified for the Ironman World Championship 5 different times, and now he's making my body part. So when I told him, he was stoked. He was like, "Really? Do you realize what you're getting into?" I'm like, "No." maybe that's why I'm getting into it.
That was probably,
If I would have realized what I was getting into, maybe I would have chose something different.
Could have talked yourself out of it.
But he was stoked. We've become good friends. I still see him. I still fly out to San Diego to get my leg work done because he's really good at what he does.
Yeah.
And he knows what the running blade and cycling leg, what needs to be done and not just to get from the couch to the kitchen, but to run a marathon after biking 112 miles. So pretty cool stuff. Yeah.
So do you have to change? Do you have a specific prosthetic for each thing? How does that work?
Different things that you can do, but first off, we're not allowed to swim with a prosthetic. So no one is. I don't even know why. in the Ironmans you weren't allowed, and Paralympics you weren't allowed. So in swimming, leg is off.
Okay.
So like if like a normal race, I would, where there's not just a ton of amputees floating around. It's like that sometimes they don't know. I'd usually take someone with me. Because, I've done 8 Ironmans, but I've done like probably 70 triathlons. So it's like I'll take my daughter with me. It's like, hey, you're going to be my handler. I'm going to walk to the water. And before this race starts, I'm going to take my leg off, give it to you. And you need to be at that swim exit when I get out. And every race is different. So if it's a very long transition from swim to where my bike and everything else is set up, I get out of the water and go straight into my running prosthesis. It's one of those blades.
Okay.
And then I'll jog to where my bike is, change that leg to my cycling one, and then I'll bike. And then when you get back from the bike, like in a triathlon, there's a centralized area. It's called the transition area. Mm-hmm. And so you have this little spot where you put your bike, your leg, if that's your thing, your other leg, if that's your thing, maybe a towel to wipe some things down. But in running shoes, biking helmet. So it works in that sense to where I've got it down to like a science how quickly I can take off and put on this leg, because the transition time matters. It was a lot of fun, and sometimes it's being creative. Sometimes you go to a race and they're like, hey, this time we have 2 transition areas. It's like, oh boy, okay, I guess I have to put my run leg here and my bike leg here, and then I have my sleeve and there's a liner underneath, and you have to think it through. I've found that I can do everything that I used to be able to do. Just now, sometimes you have to adapt and be a little bit creative, which is kind of cool.
Okay. So this has led to basically a career as a speaker, as a public speaker and motivational speaker. I mean, what do you consider yourself a motivational speaker or inspirational speaker? Because it's 2 different things, and I think about this all the time.
I feel like I'm more of an inspirational speaker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope I do more than just motivate someone for the next week. I want, I guess, lessons that I've learned. I want them to remember them 3 years from now. And the coolest thing is like, I guess when I speak, like I basically just share stories of people that taught me lessons. And stories stick, because I'll run into someone years later and they're like, when you were talking about your daughter and she was talking about the handicap placard, and it's like, that was just a story, but that resonated with them, that stuck. It's fun. So I guess I don't know. I've never been like extremely loud. Mm-hmm. And that's what I picture a motivational speaker doing.
You're very soft-spoken. And again, that's something you've always been.
Right. And you can't fake it. Because even in the Marine Corps, when I told buddies at the Naval Academy, it's like, I'm going to go Marine. They were like, you can't. You're not loud enough. And I found, really quickly, like, you don't have to. When you go and you try to be someone that you're not, it's not genuine, and people aren't going to believe it. So
they pick up on it really quick.
Yeah. So I just... when I started speaking, I thought that maybe I had to do that, because I saw like a Tony Robbins getting all in there and doing it, and I'm like, I'm going to try that. It's like that doesn't work for me. It's like I'm just kind of stay a little bit,
So what are you doing? Where are you talking? Tell us a little bit about the speaking gig, and where's that? This is all over the country.
Yeah, it's all over the country. And it's definitely not something I ever would have saw myself doing. It's weird now.
It seems very out of character for you. It really does.
It's just like I just had a lot of trouble saying no at the beginning.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was my first talk was I met this guy. I was out running and he was riding a bike, and we were going up a hill. I was breathing heavy, and he was just asking questions. Yeah. And then he's like, "Oh man, it's great to meet you. We'll see you." And he bikes away. And then like 2 weeks later, I saw him again. We were coming across each other, and he saw me and like turned around. He said, "Oh, I'm so glad I found you. I lead a Boy Scout troop, and we have this ceremony thing coming up. Would you come and share your story with my boys?" And I was like, it's the last thing I want to do. I was already nervous. Yeah. I was like, I just don't know what I would say to them. He's like, just say what you said to me when we were running up that hill, or when I was biking and running. And so I went and did it, and it was cool. It was fun. And then like a teacher asked me to come to their class, and then a school asked me to do this, and then someone asked me to come talk to their company, and I just like kept saying yes. And then someone paid me to do it. I was like, what? Why would you do that? And like, well, that's what we do. We bring in speakers. And, you know, you get compensated for your time. Yeah, and that's, I mean, I just kept saying yes and going and doing it, and you know, feeling weird and awkward, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm doing good or not. And it was like all about me, like in my head. It's like, what? How did I look? How did I sound? Do I look like an idiot up there? You know, how's it going? And probably for a year, it was like me doing that, and eventually, it changed from like thinking about myself. It's like it changed to, all right, I have an audience out there. Like, what am I saying that is actually impacting them? Like, what can I say? How can I translate what I've been through to better affect and impact my audience? And that's when it was like, this is fun. This is rewarding. Now it's like not so much about how dumb I look up there,
right?
But it's about saying something that even if, you know, that doesn't matter how big the audience is. If one person takes one thing away and implements it into their life, or somehow, you know, becomes more successful because of it, or mends a relationship, then it's like, man, now what I'm doing actually has some purpose.
Yeah.
And I was missing that for a while. I was missing like this purpose when I got out of the Marine Corps.
Sure.
You know, I was serving a purpose larger than myself, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't. And it took me a while to figure out that getting on a stage and talking, you know, there was purpose behind it. And when I realized there was, you know, it grew. So like I speak, and you know, it's a very versatile topic. You know, I talk about resilience, and I share principles of resilience, and you know, I kind of storytell. It's like I have a lot of fun.
What's your target audience? What demographic do you really connect with?
Ooh, you know, it's hard because the first, I guess I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years now, but I was just so all over the, like I would go to elementary school one day, the next day I'd be at a corporate conference, and the next day at a college. I'll tell you what I really like to do. I like to do college and high school. Because I think those, at that point in time, they're still developing this foundation that they're going to have for the rest of their life. And, you know, at that time, you're kind of thinking a lot about yourself. And I just love going in there talking about, hey, it's okay to be uncomfortable and getting out of your comfort zone and, you know, and doing hard things. You know, I really enjoy that. But I do a lot of corporate talks, a lot of like if there's a corporate conference and they have, you know, two or 3 days, a lot of technical stuff going on. I'm generally either an opener or a closer, come in, you know, where it's either get them fired up for the conference or, you know, I'm the last thing that they hear. So so it's really hard to break it down to like one specific demographic, but that's, you know, it's kind of travel the country and do a lot of gigs.
That's good stuff, man. That is good stuff. When I was a kid, my father always told me about 5 pillars. And he said, these 5 pillars are basically the foundational pillars of a good life, right? It's live, love, learn, pray, inspire. Okay?
Yep.
Does one of them stick out to you? Does one of them resonate, and why?
Ooh. They all kind of do. So live, learn.
Live, love, learn, pray, and inspire.
Learn, pray, and inspire. You know, pray jumps out at me first. It's kind of, you know, in the morning I wake up and just throughout the day I want to constantly be in prayer. Love, I mean, I just automatically think of my family. And live, I like do things, right? You know, it's a lot of us are getting through the day, but not actually living, and sometimes I get stuck in periods of that as well. But I know, like when I was speaking at first, like I would travel to a city and just go right to the hotel room, be prepping for my speech, give them a talk, right back to the airport, fly home. And I was like, you know what? I've been to a lot of cool cities and I haven't seen anything.
haven't seen it yet.
Like I'm
Yep.
gonna be deliberate about getting out and going and experiencing something.
for
Hey,
you.
if I'm in South Dakota, I'm gonna go see Mount Rushmore. If I'm in New York City, I'm gonna go to Times Square. You know, so
Yeah.
I don't know, just being more deliberate about like actually living, and inspiring. I guess I'm well, I do the inspirational speaking thing, but I just think the way you live your life, like there's always someone looking at you, whether it's your kid or your grandkid or your neighbor or your friends, and if just know that you're being observed, and are you the example that you want those people to see and maybe want to be like, or I don't know. I don't go out there saying I'm going to inspire someone today. I'm going to crush it. It's like, no, I'm going to live. You know, I'm going to live. And it'd be kind of cool if someone was inspired by it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that most people who are inspiring, they don't wave a flag. They just go out and live their life and let people watch.
Those pillars are really good. 'Cause I didn't mention learn, but always a student. You should always be a student. Always be reading something.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
Well, listen, this has been great. I appreciate it. I don't want to keep you here all day, but it was great catching up and just hearing your story, man. I'm very proud of you. I love what you're doing and who you are and who you've become, and keep doing it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks for having me on, and let's not let 10 more years go
Yeah,
by.
no, let's
before
do it.
we chat.
And now you're back home. You're living in Bethel Park.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, let's definitely keep in touch and do this again. This is great.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right.